Well, let me start with this. I'm really glad that we're talking about it in terms of crime, because I think that's one of the problems that we have with around that risk fatigue that exists within our population in America is because people don't think of it as crime, right? People don't equate, if you get your bank card stolen on a strange website, you don't feel the same violation as if somebody came in and broke the window of your house and stole something out of your bedroom, right? If somebody did that, you feel really violated. You'd say crime happened at my house, right? And I'm really worried about my security. When that happens to your bank account on a website, though, you don't feel violated, right? You don't feel that same response, but it's still a crime. It's fraud, but it's a crime, right? And so I'm glad that we're talking about it in terms of crime. I think that's something that as a culture at large, we really need to start to emphasize. Not I was a victim of identity theft, but you got to talk about it like, not that everyone should be sad or stressed out or emotional about it, but like we need to talk about it with those terms and that vocabulary. The police were involved. This was an investigation. This was a crime.
Hey, what's going down, everyone? This is Dr. Eric Huffman from the Mike Club, and I am extremely fortunate today. I have one of the most uniquely, like, the diverse background of Dick Wilkinson is just, I saw his profile and I started doing some research and started looking at like who are some of the most unique professionals I can find, and Dick was one of them. And oh my gosh, Dick, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for being here. So can you give us a brief rundown of how'd you start and how did you end up as the CTO of Proof Labs and with a brief stint as a CISO of the Supreme Court of New Mexico? Can you, a lot of people probably hear that and think, how the hell did that happen? Can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think a lot of people find their way into cybersecurity through a couple of different lanes. They either focus on it in school or university and they get really dialed in, or through the military tends to be kind of the other career route where you either have an opportunity or get some introduction to computer skills and you get an opportunity to kind of build your career around cybersecurity. So for me, it was the military route. I joined the Army about 23 years ago. And a good part of this that you'll enjoy is I had to pick my school and what job was I going to have. And the decision didn't come down to how cool is the job or what kind of stuff will I get to do. It was, do you want to go to Arizona for 6 months or do you want to go to Pensacola, Florida for 6 months? And no shade on Arizona, but I was a young man and Pensacola, Florida just sounded like more fun. And that actually started me, as serendipity has it, on my 20-year career doing signals intelligence in the Army. The Army really focuses on diversity of skill set throughout your entire time so that you can continue to grow as a technician and as a leader. So that really forced me to take on assignments where I never stayed within one technology area. I got to get exposure to all sorts of different technology areas. And doing that for 20 years just made me a super well-rounded technician. So when it was time to depart from the Army, it was pretty clear that the industry needs for my skill set was cybersecurity. So I stepped out of the Army and went to work for the Supreme Court here in New Mexico. I was the Chief Information Security Officer there for about a year. And then I moved up to be the Chief Technology Officer, which was the director of the organization for about another year and a half. Departed there late last year. And I'm now the Chief Technology Officer of my own company, Proof Labs, as you mentioned earlier. We started up about a year ago, and we're working to provide technology solutions to the space industry here in New Mexico, as well as state and local government doing advisory roles with that. So,
wow, talking started from the military, just immediately just grew, and then ended up. I'm interested in you being the CISO of the Supreme Court for
mhm.
New Mexico. Um, how how did that work? What kind of challenges existed there? Because rather than me theorize in my own head and come up with your job description,
Yeah,
can you just let us behind the veil a little bit? What kind of challenges existed being a CISO of a Supreme Court?
sure. Well, I think when say some of this stuff, some of your other kind of security managers and IT senior folks out there will understand what some of this is about. Um, when you got a lot of executive leaders, the more executives you have tends to be the more challenging your role as a security officer, because everybody needs a little bit of special care and feeding. And that's fair, honestly. I mean, those folks have specific kind of habits and needs, and you want to account for those. You can't just tell people these are the rules. Well, in a regular company, you might have 10, 15 people like that. When you are doing this job for the judicial branch, every judge and a lot of other elected officials and a whole lot of high paid lawyers and people that just all truly do have that right to that kind of level of special circumstance, right? You've got about 200 people that have that sort of quality about them in your workforce. So it makes that job as a security officer very challenging, in that you need to build relationships first. You really have to be the very visible CISO. You can't be behind the scenes. You can't just show up every now and then and pop up and do an investigation and disappear for a year. You have to really be vocal, and you have to get all those people on board. And when you can get your security program kind of in the minds of those 200 special executives, then the rest of the workforce, of course, is going to follow their leadership. But winning the hearts and minds of a couple hundred people to your security plans is not always an easy feat.
I could imagine so. So when you're in a seat like that, where did you prioritize your risk and your vulnerabilities? How did your thought process go about that through like the judicial branch?
Mhm.
Did you see it this in a very similar light as many of us IT cyber professionals do, or was it a little bit different? Were your handcuffs a little bit different, so to speak, in that role?
Well, there are some qualities about being in the judiciary specifically. Government is a little bit different than industry in what your customers expect of you and kind of your relationship with your customers, because it's the public, or it's got other government agencies versus a paying customer or contract, right? So it's not quite the same. But the contract that you hold with the public is this expectation that they have of you, right? They spend taxpayer dollars. You've got these written rules and regulations, and they can measure your performance at any time, kind of just by looking into what do you do. Everything you do is transparent. Everything you do is very much an open book. I had a disclaimer at the bottom of my email signature block to say everything you send or receive from this email address is public record. That you can't have a private conversation with me. It's just not possible, right? if we're talking and I'm in my official capacity, anyone can ask for a record of that conversation. So, that changes the dynamic of how you do your job, especially in security, when you have to be that transparent. You can't really safeguard secrets like I did in the military, where I had classification schemes. So every decision you make can be investigated. But with that being said, we did look at risk a little bit differently than how I think your regular commercial industry partner would. I had a group that we managed. It was like an advisory group that came together for the CISO. That was the strategic risk group. And that was a couple of judges, a couple of senior leaders from courts, a couple of customer level type folks that were staff members in the courts, and some other IT staff. And we evaluated risk based on the technical risk of our systems. We evaluated risk based on these, did we call it? The reputation of the courts. That was one of the other things it's not administrative, it's not technical, but it's important. And it's one of those things, if we had a problem that clearly data was lost, court records that were sensitive records were stolen, reputation of the courts is harmed. That is an intangible, but it's very hard to repair. So keeping that thought in mind, along with all the other types of risk that you're qualifying and thinking about, you need a group of people to help you with that. And it's just different than anything else you usually think about.
Ah, geez. Yeah, it's how how I'm trying to think of how to phrase this within a branch like the judicial branch, the Supreme Court of the state of New Mexico. Many, when you talk reputation, many organizations, they think about, hey, if our reputation gets tarnished, the organization may eventually falter and go away. Well,
Mhm.
that's not the case when you're talking about the judicial branch and Supreme
Sure.
Court of an entire state. It's not like the reputation of the state's going to go. So you know what? Hey, we're just going to have to shut her up, New Mexico,
Right.
and call it good. So
Yeah.
managing that reputation, it's surprising to hear that that was so high up on your list,
Mhm.
knowing that uh, you're almost not untouchable, but you're just not going to go anywhere. Like
Sure.
the judicial branch is just not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. It came down to the Supreme Court justices and the culture that they instilled in the judges. Is that essentially that reputation of the courts is essentially a bank that it can never be robbed, but if you take something out of it, you can almost never put it back in, right?
Mm,
So you have to protect that at all costs. You have to make sure that you're above reproach and that you can prove that you've done everything you possibly can to safeguard that information. It doesn't mean that there'll never be a breach. It doesn't mean that the worst day may never come, but you have to be able to prove that you put in all the thought and care that was required to protect that information. And so that's where we really took the focus with that.
wow. So how coming from the army to a different level of government,
Hmm.
now to the industry, what
Yeah.
is the biggest differences you see between government and industry, whether it's pros and cons or just clear differences in the approach and the way you have to approach your job as a
Hmm.
security professional?
Hmm. I think the some of the first things that I've noticed and kind of the earliest things that stick out to me in looking at this transition of looking at risk a little bit differently is the levers that you can pull to address risk. How can you mitigate that risk? And it tends to be that the answers to risk problems for industry can be very different than the answers to risk problems for the government. The government's got really long budget cycles. It's not that they don't have enough money to do things, especially when I was in the military. People would say, "Oh, budget." I'd say, "Man, let's be honest. We're working at the National Security Agency. There's no end to this money. We just need to be very careful and serious about what we do with it. But if we're doing the right thing with it, it's not going to end." But in the commercial world, that's not true. You can run out of money, right? However, you can also spend that money right now if you need to, right? You can pull the lever and buy something. You can get help. You can spend $100,000 to solve a problem tomorrow in industry. You can't do that in government. It may take you a year to get that money programmed in, and you're accepting risk all the way until you get that money. And you're staring right at that problem and trying to put, whatever other controls you can around it. But those timelines around funding really change the way you have to manage risk. And not just the funding, but again, government regulation is there. I felt like I had plenty of autonomy that I needed to make decisions at the state level. I never felt like my hands were tied there. But for sure that I knew that there were some options that would just never be on the table under the government realm, as far as being able to hire certain types of agencies or even get foreign support from hire an outside resource from a different country. I may never be able to go hire a team of software developers from Japan, which I would do in my company, but I couldn't do that in the government. So it's things like that just change the landscape for how you manage risk.
Wow. Wow. And I know it's interesting because you and I, we level in a lot of areas. One specifically being in where do we place our focus in our security posture. You speak about securing people as much as you secure networks.
Mhm.
Can you tell us why that is? Why do you choose the humanistic approach? Not to say you completely negate technology. I don't think anyone's saying that. But
Mhm.
why do you choose to place such a high emphasis on people and before technology?
Sure. That's got to be my roots in the secure workforce of the military, right? I mean, being a member of the Intelligence and Security Command, the whole nature of the workforce is it's a secure workforce, right? Add to that, at times when you have to have security clearances, and you just see the night and day difference between the way that the culture, inside the wire, as we call it, when you have that a skiff or a security clearance, versus just how even within the military business gets done outside the wire. Even just that, I could see that when your workforce wakes up and eats, breathes, and sleeps security in that environment, you need it. You don't need that in every corporate environment or every government office, but you can just see that the mindset impacts the way that everything else gets done. And so there's value in humans. They can serve so many. They're defenders, they're responders, they're the best alarms. They can tell you things that a computer system just may never tell you. And so being able to train even non-technical folks on understanding what your security needs are for the organization and how to support those needs. They don't have to be computer wizards, but if they understand the message coming from the top, they're definitely going to be, that's time well spent. It's an investment that you can't measure, but it works. It just works every time.
Yeah. So when it comes to the humanistic side of security, uh, where where do you feel people are most vulnerable? Is it phishing? Is it social engineering, like physical social engineering, digital social engineering? Where do
Mhm.
you feel we are most deficient?
Oh, we're most all of us fall victim to things that, there's those classic indicators of like, does this put a time constraint on you? Does this make you feel like you're under pressure to do something? Does it put some sort of social pressure on you, like your boss is going to be upset? And so we all fall flat when we get that emotional response to whatever it was, right? When you start to read it faster because you're emotionally driven by what that first subject was of the email or the first thing that the person on the phone said, and they've put you in that emotional state, that's we all fall down at that point, right? And
Yeah.
so we respond differently to the stimulus. Some people are going to fall for a certain tactic or another. But once you've gotten into that emotional state of responding to whatever the input is, you're probably you're on you're being taken for a ride at that point. You
Oh,
know, so
oh,
yeah.
definitely, definitely. I feel my research, my postdoctorate research, is a lot on phishing and digital social engineering, and
Hmm.
I agree with what you said wholeheartedly. When people are when they're time prompted or when they're comfortable, kind of the in between, it's kind of the good zone
Hmm.
when you're not time prompted, but you're also in a more professional setting. When
Yeah.
you're comfortable, you're more willing to just relaxing your guard is let down and
Hmm.
you're just reading,
Yeah.
and when you're reading you're interpreting the information in your own voice and you don't naturally want to be fooled. And so the same thing that pressure prompts you or time prompts you has the ability to psychologically compromise you.
Yeah.
We're in this unique time where if you think about I spoke to someone else about this. When you think about the humanistic side in a digital landscape and you realize that people are finding their husbands and wives online, they're literally falling in love online,
Hmm.
it's only natural to get fooled. Like, hey, if you can fall in love
Sure.
online,
Yeah.
my goodness, you can send me your
Yep.
credit card
You
information,
can
no
invoke
problem.
any emotional response that you want. If you can invoke that, you can invoke anything. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And
So I've actually got a story for you about that, about how the where you're at and whether you're comfortable or not affects your behavior. So I think you'll like this. We noticed we were doing, and this is in line with phishing as well. So I was with the organization, and we noticed that we were doing phishing training, like attempted phishing, simulated phishing attacks before and after the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had some consistent failure rates and we kind of understood what they would be. And then when we revisited some of those same groups after the pandemic, now here's the difference. They were all working inside the building and they were all, I'm at work, I'm on my government computer, I'm in my government secure area, and I'm in the secure work environment, right? We had to send all those employees home, right? And once we started to send employees home and then restarted the training a few months later, the same populations were failing at a much higher rate. Same people, same tasks, same workload, same everything, but they were falling for those phishing simulations at a higher rate. Why is that? I postulated, and I've spoken about it in a couple of settings, that it comes down to the difference in your mindset around interacting with the computer, the human machine interaction, whether you're standing at work at a desk or a workstation, or whether you're sitting at your kitchen table. Just that physical environmental difference was enough that people don't see those red flags that they would see at work. They don't see them in that exact same message when it's presented to them at their kitchen table.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating, because my research shows the very same thing, that I was at a government facility, and so I asked the audience who feels email is a formal setting, just by a quick show of hands. Not a single person raised their hand, because we've turned email, like when I was in school, we used to learn how to write a very well-written letter, and email was nothing but a digital letter. So you had to formulate it this exact way. We went from that to, like, I'm sending memes in my email
to your boss. Right.
Exactly. So when you open up email, when you start thinking about email and you start thinking about your digital setting, nothing about it exudes that, hey, I have to be a professional right now. No, especially when you're business up top and pajamas at the bottom, like you're very, at that point, hackable. You're very hackable at that point. And I love your perspective on the pandemic, because the pandemic took us out of the office into the home, where now, when you were comfortable before, you might have been suit and tie or dress however you choose to go to work, feeling more professional. Now we're all just very, very, very comfortable. But the attackers stay the same. The attackers, they still have the same avenue to reach us.
Yep.
So when it comes to phishing, there's a notion of the death of distance, where you can reach anyone at any moment in time, whether it be first name dot last name at whatever.com or whatever. Now that the attacker has the ability to reach anybody pretty much at any moment in time, the only thing that's preventing the attacker from reaching the human is a spam filter. So what are your thoughts on managing that attack landscape, where it's like, hey, we got everybody, well, pretty much any attacker that wants to attack your organization, they can get a business card, find a naming convention, if it's first name dot last name, or if it's just first name at whatever, and start reaching everybody. How do you feel that landscape is changing the security threat landscape?
I'll say I was very impressed when I got the chance to get Google email administrator rights in one of my jobs, and able to kind of find out about how the configurations, and even further find out about how the bigger upstream service that is Gmail, and what other services do the same thing, just how much they do from a technical perspective to protect your inbox. Not only to protect your inbox, but of course to just stop their own servers from chewing up power that doesn't need to be used. Don't keep sending the message if nobody's ever going to read it. But just the level of sophistication around identifying spammy senders, identifying clearly, bot-based senders, identifying offending entire IP ranges or server farms that are doing that, and doing that at that corporate, protect the internet level. It's just amazing how much they do and how many people it takes to just beat down the monster that is spam email. So I just want to applaud those top level services for doing what they do. And if you're a regular user and don't see behind that, I guess rest assured that some of those things really do work really, really well. The tiny little bit that makes it through to you, it's unfortunate, but it's just that next little iteration in the filter that they figured out how to bypass. But I think what that tells us though is you're never going to get to the idea of like a zero threat inbox. It's just not going to happen, right? So if that's your goal as a company or your goal as an organization, and to have like that zero threat inbox for your employees, you might want to reevaluate your goals. You're probably going to spend a lot of money trying to do that, and you may never get there. So I think with email, close enough is good enough for some of that. Now, I know that sounds terrible because I also turn right around to a client and say, email is your biggest threat, and then you hear me say, well, but close enough is good enough. Well, what that means is exactly what we just talked about earlier. You can spend a good amount of money on good email and services and protections around that, and then you can invest in making sure that your employees understand what to do when they get the email that made it to the inbox, that was that iteration beyond the filter, that made it through the second or third filter and still has a live link in it. They know that doesn't make sense. I've never seen a clickable link in my email before. What's wrong, right? You want the employee to look at that and say, that doesn't usually happen. That's much better than what I say, good enough is close enough, because you got to close that gap somewhere else. You can't go triple nines and quadruple nines and 5 nines on your email risk level. You have to understand that you're going to pick up some of that slack somewhere else.
Wow. Yeah, I think one thing that's really changed the game for me in regards to email, and when we talk about email, immediately the mind goes to security awareness training. What changed the game for me was not just running the phishing campaign, not just getting the data from the phishing campaign, but talking to the user after the phishing campaign. So rather than, hey, you failed the phishing test, we're going to shame you, make you wear the dunce cap, sit you in the corner, and just all point and laugh at you. No, I wanted to talk to those users. And when I started speaking to those users from a research side, from my research side, the answers became crazy to me. Mid-COVID, like when the pandemic first hit, we all went home and no one knew exactly what was going to happen. I was working with an organization, went to full research mode, started working with an organization. And I remember I spoke with a group of about 10 to 15 people in an organization. I just asked, like, hey, why did you fall for this phishing scam? Like, let me tell you what it was. It was me, Lottie Dottie. And they said, well, you spoofed the CEO and we're scared we're going to lose our jobs. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I spoke, hey, Mr. CEO, you have this human vulnerability. Because until you say something, until you can put everyone's mind at ease that their jobs is safe or a little bit of transparency, this attack vector is going to be wide open. And I highly suggest you hold like a town hall or something to tell them they're going to be okay. Because as of right now, they're scared of you. And I don't think we spend a lot of time understanding why the number is what it is. Because if you're running a phishing campaign, or if you're running security awareness, or you're running some social engineering practices, a phishing campaign or something like that, a phishing campaign that you get 0 clicks on, that's a horrible phishing campaign.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like you need to understand that you're going to get something, but you need to understand why you're going to get that something. But also, if you run a phishing campaign and everybody clicks, That's something's wrong. Something's wrong
Yeah,
with that as well. We gotta learn and understand the data in that gray area.
yeah,
I think that is crucial to us going forward.
yeah. I agree. There's a debate, of course, in the industry around whether you should fish for people or not. And I do think it really comes down to, are you going to harm trust? Is what that argument always is. Is do you harm trust between your employee base and your security team, right? If that's the only interaction you ever have with your staff, your employees, the leadership of your company is when you fish them, sure, you're going to harm their trust. Yeah, because that's it. They're going to have positive, negative. It doesn't matter. They think you're out to trick them, or you're just there to give them a test, like a pop quiz, right? So if nobody wants to interact with that person. But if that's not the only way that you talk to them, if you tell them, I mean, I've been went as far as to tell them, hey, we're about to have this phishing campaign. Like, you're going to see some weird stuff. We would tell people right up front, it's going to happen sometime in the next 2 weeks, right? So that way they didn't feel like they were being tricked. They understood that they were being exercised and that the opportunity was to train, right? Totally different. It doesn't change the way we executed the program at all. The only thing that changed was we sent out that message and tell them what was going to happen, right? And just that alone changes the culture, changes the relationship they have with the security team. It tells them that they can talk to you when they fail the test, and that their supervisor's not going to get mad at them. It just tells them that right up front, and it doesn't change the effectiveness of the test because you still have people that fail it, right? So they saw the message, but you're still getting the measurement of the human response, and hopefully without some of the maybe false alarms, or what that in that case was, a very true reflection of a security problem. But you can put that stuff away before it even gets started.
Yeah, the notion, the argument of, are you harming trust or not? I love the opinions of that. I love the disagreement of that, because there's no clear cut 100%. This is true answer to it. I'm a firm believer in that we need to practice how we fight. And we can't say, hey, I'm gonna send you this email and I have this blatant misspelling. It's kind of like you're a boxer, and so you're practicing with like little pillows, and you're just jabbing at half pace. However, the enemy's going to come in and it's just going to straight Mike Tyson your entire face.
Yeah, right. They don't have any rules to play by. Yeah, exactly.
I believe we need to practice how we fight. And that's an Eric Huffman belief. We need to practice how we fight. And so when I go through a phishing campaign, I'm pulling out all the stops. I'm spoofing COVID. I'm spoofing the WHO. I'm spoofing all this stuff, because this is what they're going to see. The Nigerian prince, granted, it was a fun little joke that we all caught on to. However, it worked. But if you think about one of the most successful attacks, period, in the world, was the I love you virus. If you remember the old I love you virus, it's because when the I love you virus got sent out, we all collectively read that email. And we all just thought, like, oh, who loves me? And then we clicked.
So emotional response, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And so that's
you left your guard somewhere else, right? You just left your guard at the door, right?
Oh, exactly. My firm belief is we need to practice how we fight. We need to practice how the enemy is going to come at us.
Like my kids, I got my kids' phones, and they're with T-Mobile, and sure enough, in the first couple of weeks, they started to get straight up scam text messages that was like, hey, collect your gift from T-Mobile. No, that was not from T-Mobile, and they had never given those phone numbers to anybody, but yet somehow they were already getting scam text messages within, less than a month. From just other internet-based activity. I'm sure just filling that number in on web forms, that's enough that it within a couple of weeks your web form activity just gets that number out there. So it's everywhere. We've got the full spectrum. I've got a 12-year-old, and I've got my mother in her 70s, and everybody's at risk. I mean, it's just there's no demographic that's not at risk. You have digital natives and digital immigrants, but that emotional response is the human piece, that it doesn't matter how old you are or what device you're interacting with. If they find the way to spawn that emotional response, they'll get you.
Oh,
So
definitely. Definitely. And we put so much of ourselves out there online.
yeah,
The open source intelligence that can be done, the OSINT that can be done is
yep,
just mind blowing.
hell
Myself
yeah,
included. Myself
yeah,
included. You know, you can go on someone's Facebook, Twitter, whatever, find a picture of them, right click, save as, copy, paste that somewhere, and then they're no longer talking to the person. They're actually seeing the person as well,
mm,
to heighten that emotion, that emotional response that you may
yeah,
get. And if if you're if you're an organization with anything worth holding on to, uh, you know, the attackers can try if they're persistent enough and they want to get you. A lot of these things can and will be used against you
yeah,
when they come knocking on your inbox, whether it
yeah,
be email or something like
right,
that.
right. Um, I keep getting a lot of job recruitments from this one specific steel company out of a specific Asian country, and I'm just not real comfortable responding to these recruitments. I'm just going to say that, but I don't know how much information they know about me, but I don't want to respond because I'm afraid I'll find out. You know what I'm
Oh my.
saying? It's one of those kind of things, like, you know. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of speaking, and I'm passionate about my research, and so I do a lot of speaking and trying to. If there's anyone out there in the world that wants to hear my research, me as a
mhm,
nerd, I'm like, oh shit, sign me up, I'm here.
yeah,
Let's go. And so I keep getting these conference requests in this one country, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, dude, like
yeah,
no way, like no way.
yeah,
So, but the the reason why I know I keep getting these messages is because we're all vulnerable emotionally to some point, to some degree. Then I
yeah,
click on it. Am I clicking on the links? No, it's just like,
yeah,
well, that conference, like, dude, sign me up
yeah,
where it's at. I'm
yeah,
that side of my brain, we need to be reflective enough and not arrogant. The level of arrogance, like, you can never fish me.
yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, okay.
that's the one. That's the kind of trifecta I learned in the SANS. Is it 504? It's their hacker like basics course. My instructor in there, and this was quite a few years back. He offered that arrogance, indifference, and oh gosh, it's arrogance, indifference, and there's the third one. These are the things that we all fall down with, and like this is how hackers get you. Um, I'm not very important, which is indifference. Oh, ignorance. That was the other one. So arrogance, ignorance, and indifference, right? Everybody that ever falls victim to, a cyber attack is usually suffering from one, at least one, or if not, maybe two or three of those things at a time. Yeah. And so I try and kind of remind, that's one of the ones I give to people that are not technical. Specifically when they ask me, just like, tell me about cybersecurity. And that's sort of the anecdote I like to give them, is like, when you're interacting with anything online, check yourself for one of these three qualities, right? Am I being arrogant? Am I being indifferent to, I'm not important, they won't hack me? Or am I, is it possible I'm being ignorant right now and I'm doing something that's over my head, right? Maybe I'm in a little further that shouldn't be trading crypto if I can't remember my password, to anything ever. Maybe I shouldn't be out here with half my life savings trying to dabble in crypto, right? Like maybe that's not for you, right? So
There, I love that arrogance, ignorance, indifference. I
yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna use that as well.
Yeah, it's a good one. It works. It's a great way to relate kind of what makes you a victim today to those non-technical folks, right? And again, it comes back to the human is the victim, the computer's not the victim, right? The computer doesn't care if its files got stolen. It's the person who shows up and can't get to the files anymore. That's the victim, right? Crime is done to people, not to machines. So
Oh yes, yes.
yeah,
That's I love that. That's so truthful. Right? Crime
yeah,
is done to people, not machines.
yeah,
And as we look as the cyber landscape begins to change, I feel that it's pressuring people a lot more. So one of the personality traits, I've done some research on the personality traits of cyber victims.
mm,
One of the most common personality traits through cyber victims are impulsiveness. The more impulsive you are, the more likely you're to become a cyber victim. Not to say there's anything wrong with impulsiveness. It's not. It's a personality trait, one I partially share as well.
Mhm.
But when I look at the variants of ransomware now that exists versus the ones that existed previously, it's really playing on the people more as we go more towards the future of technology. Before, ransomware is you're locked out, send us 3 Bitcoin, which is now like $11 billion. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
3 Bitcoin, and you'll get your information back.
yeah,
Now it's your information has been encrypted. Send us 3 Bitcoin today, or you can send us 6 Bitcoin tomorrow. And
yeah,
so it's implying a lot of pressure on
yeah,
people to become more impulsive, to
yeah,
impulse buy. You're
yeah,
just
right,
buying your stuff back, but
yeah,
impulse buy. It's kind of
yeah,
like that scarcity principle of influence. Like,
yeah,
there's only 3 left. You have to act now.
yeah, yeah.
So I see that.
Oh, I mean, that's
future is going to be on
absolutely,
people.
yeah. I mean, that is happening. And I've seen also, essentially, there's a point where they just won't negotiate. They tell you really like, hey, you get like 2 tries, and 5 days from now, we're just going to hang up and not call back. So of course they have to be willing to commit to that, and walk away from whatever payday they think they have as a criminal. But yeah, I mean that level of threat is built in there. Like, hey, if you just decide not to play, throw all your computers away next Friday, because we're not gonna interact anymore. So, and then they go beyond just the access to the files, but the trend of trying to blackmail or even just hold governed organizations at a higher ransom, because they say it's not that we just locked up your stuff, but we've got HIPAA related information that we stole from you. So now we're going to charge more because we could just release this information even after we unlock your stuff. Like, there's an additional cost to to pay off the blackmail note as well. So, that's that other part, that it's the organization is worried about their reputation. It's about, will I be able to continue to do business if I catch all these HIPAA findings, and I'm a doctor? Am I just going to go out of business? Like, that may be the end of me. And so it's easier to pay that ransom than to even contemplate all those things, much less run them to ground and turn them into realities. You just make the money, make it go away.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question on your thought process of where society stands as a whole regarding reputation and cyber attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 sides to this coin, and I think 2 things could be true at the same time. Honestly, one is organizations are hyper vigilant, and they're worried about their reputation after a data breach, after a cyber attack.
Mm-hmm.
And then another is that society is so used to there being data breaches that organizations are no longer as worried about the reputation after a cyber attack, because people care less, because everyone, in the layman's perspective, everyone's gotten hacked anyway, whether it's Target, Lowe's, Home Depot. They've all gotten attacked. Where do you think we stand currently on that? Do you think both things are true, or do you think, all right, organizations are still more hyper vigilant, or people we're just stopping caring as much?
I think I thought of a term that describing what you just talked about: risk fatigue, right? Let's call it risk fatigue, right? And so let's talk about risk fatigue of the population, right? Of the customers, the people whose data got stolen, right? Yeah, I know that 6 times last year my bank account got compromised by whatever random online accounts that websites, and every company that I did business with. I might have got 4 letters last year that said, hey, your stuff got compromised. We'll watch your account for you, and if anything happens, we'll reimburse you. Yeah, you almost don't even read the details of that letter anymore. You're like, oh, it's another one. Fold it up. Is it something I'm worried about? No. Oh, I haven't bought anything from Discount Tire in 3 years. That doesn't matter. I don't even have that card anymore. You just throw it away, right? Your risk fatigue is like, it's almost junk mail sometimes for the customer. So I think that, sure, that decision maker that's sitting behind the table in the company goes, well, I got 5 of these last year, nothing bad happened. do customers really care anymore? And if they're not held to the fire by something like HIPAA or a financial, requirement or some other privacy law requirement, I think you're absolutely right. There are plenty of industries that are willing to take a little bit of a relaxed position on that because there's not a huge consequence and there's not a customer consequence. I'm not going to make, most people don't make purchasing decisions based on those types of breaches, right? I'm sure that the 2 million people that got breached in Home Depot 8 years ago have shopped at Home Depot again. I know I have, and I'm pretty sure I got breached there. So, I didn't avoid Home Depot because of it. So,
yeah, that's interesting. That's something I think about, not very often, but it does cross my mind. Like, are we too relaxed? Have we normalized data breaches? And if we normalize data breaches, what is it going to take for us to turn the table to be back hyper vigilant? And I think it's going to be, granted, I am not running for office, so I know this is not going to be popular at all. It's like a US version of the GDPR, and I think it's coming.
Oh, absolutely. I do run for office at times when I'm feeling froggy, and I absolutely would promote something like a GDPR or an increased level of control over your own personal data. We need to scrutinize our privacy laws that we have in the United States for sure. We need to plus up our just control of our own data. We need to throw away this concept that we have of the end user license agreement that we have now. I think that is one place where actual political and legal reform is required, so that a person that is at the one end of those spectrums of that risk factor that can't really comprehend just how much danger they're taking into their hands by using these internet connected devices, right? And then they're clicking yes to a 60-page long contract with a company over their data, and they don't understand it. That's disingenuous, right? I mean, and we can absolutely do better than that. So there's a lot of room for improvement on the policy side around this stuff, and GDPR can be an inspiration for that here for sure.
Wow, can you dive a little bit deeper into ending the end user license agreement? There's not ending it. I mean, reforming it.
Reforming the heck out of it.
Yeah. I apologize that I said that.
No, I said get rid of the construct that we call the end user license agreement today. I say end it, like literally retitle it, give it a whole different legal concept of what is this? What is this agreement that I'm doing between the manufacturer and me of this hardware? What is this that I'm doing between the provider of this service, software, cloud-based, whatever, and my data that I'm going to populate into it, right? Make that extremely clear. Don't let it hide behind legal jargon. Don't let it be buried behind things that aren't relevant, right? We need to put together some categories that every consumer actually cares about and list those right up front, page 1, big red letters, click these 5 things. This is what we will and won't do. I don't really know what that has to be, but it needs to reach that level of simplicity, right? So that everyone can truly agree to it. What we're agreeing to now is it's just not a valid agreement, I think is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact grade level, so I won't even state it, but I know there's the average American reads at X grade level, wherever that means. Might be between sixth and eighth grade. And I imagine the end user
yeah,
license.
That's what it should be called, right? That's probably what it used to be called. While we're tricking them too hard, we have to change the name.
The end user license agreement. I imagine if I don't have the exact number. I imagine it's probably written well above the average reading level.
It's written by lawyers. We'll just start with that, right? I mean, it's not written by technical people, right? If it's a technical product, it doesn't matter. The legal department wrote the EULA, right? So we'll just start there. It's not written in language that most people are even going to want to consume, just because of that. It's written in a nature that it's not, I don't want to say it's meant to be deceptive. That's not what I mean at all, but it's covering liabilities that have nothing to do with how you interact with this tool or this service and what you think, right? And so it's just covering bases that have nothing to do with your interaction with this thing. So that's why people don't read it, right? Because there's so much stuff there it's truly not relevant to how you're going to use that tool. So
yeah, because I'm also curious the reason and rationalization behind that may have been organizations that want your data. It's probably not going to try to do anything malicious with it, but you visit the website, they might want to scrape what you're interested in so they can sell you on something, or scrape what you have so they can possibly contact you later so you can become a customer to grow their business. There's probably some legitimate reasons for that, but we've gone too far with it. We've gone too far, and I like your thought process. I think it's very, very interesting. I've never thought about, hey, should we do something different with our end loser license agreement? Us being the loser, I include myself in on that. Us being should we really, really reframe that? I thought about, what if we rewrote them? At least the company that I was working with at some point in time. I don't want to call any organization out. Someone's probably going to look it up and try to figure out what it is anyway. But I was working with the organization, and I threw out, like, what if we rewrote our terms and conditions to be 2 pages and at like a 6th grade reading level? It was a very good conversation, and it lasted about a good 30 minutes. Nothing happened after that.
I can believe that.
I'm curious. Different organizations need that data for different reasons. Not to say, hey, Eric and Dick are just ignorantly look at. I know there's reasons for that data. I know there's reasons for that data, but we should be clear and concise about what are the reasons for that data.
Well, I take the security professional look at it. There's only so many opportunities you have to educate that user about the risk that they're going to take when they interact with this device or this software or this website, right? And if it's a device, if we're talking about a new computer that you bought or a new IoT connected device in your house, that end user license agreement or the piece of paperwork that comes with it, that's probably the one time that you have as the manufacturer or the provider of that service to let your customer know this is the risk associated with using this device. Not you're going to get shocked, right? But these are some of the things that you need to be concerned with. This is how you can protect yourself. That's the one time you get to have that kind of conversation or interaction with that customer. If that's buried on page 25 of a 50-page EULA, you're never going to have that conversation with that user, right? So that's really what I want to achieve is that outcome, which is that the opportunity for the user to find that information in a really easy and accessible way and make a decision about their comfort level with that needs to be more upfront and just clear of what you're doing when you say yes and what that risk is. And it shouldn't be buried in the concept around what protects the company more than what protects you. It should be more balanced than it is right now.
Agreed. So as we progress forward as we look at today, we can see the problems that exist today. What do you see as the future of technology and align that with security? Meaning, like, we can go as extreme as self-driving vehicles, or now we got smart light bulbs. I'm pretty sure there's going to be smart shoestrings out there. And as we incorporate more IoT devices and more, a car can be IoT, but the thing's almost, it's pretty much a computer. It's pretty much a computer at this point. As we progress forward in knowing your knowledge of the current threat landscape and how you see it progressing, where do you see us ending up with self-driving vehicles with this? Not to promote fear or anything. Do you think we're going to get better, or do you think this is going to get significantly worse before it gets better?
No, I don't think we're at some we're screaming towards some sort of worse before it gets better situation. I do a lot of thinking around trying to compare this internet revolution that we're having with other revolutions that have happened in cultural instances, whether it be, industrial or sort of the transportation revolution of everybody having vehicles. So I try and compare sort of the infancy, where are we at in our maturity levels with the internet versus kind of what happened in society in some of those other areas. And so if you compare it and you look at it, we're not in the infancy anymore, but we're barely at the adolescence phase of what is the internet really going to mean to humans over the next, 1,000 years or whatever. So we're still very early in the process. So that's why we have these things that don't quite fit right, like crappy policy to address the problems that everybody suffers from, right? That's why we have that. That's why we have technology that outpaces the rate that security can keep up with. But consumers care more about driving that pace of change and innovation than they do about staying secure in the process, right? That's one of the growing pains of this adolescence of this industry and of this kind of internet revolution, right? So if we look at it that way, and we want to consider ourselves in that adolescence, right? And that we're going to probably keep having growing pains for a few years. I think that's a way to look at it versus it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I think we're going to get different types of growing pains over the next few years, right? And sometimes you can qualify that down to that cat and mouse game, like, well, it was usernames and passwords, and then people started figuring out passwords. So now it's multi-factor authentication, and then, then we'll go to biometrics, right? Maybe that's the path that we end up on. But I think what we do when we do that is those cat and mouse games are really just these cyclical needs for maturity in this industry, right? We've got to go through some of those things to figure out what can society really tolerate around privacy laws? What can society really tolerate around having every single surface of your house being a TV screen with a camera in it, right? Where's the line? We haven't drawn those lines yet. We haven't decided. The internet connected refrigerator may never catch on, right? That may be IoT one step too far. It's there, and maybe it dies. Maybe it becomes extinct, right? So we still got to have these innovations and ideas come up, get ugly, work out, and either get mature or die and go away. And we're going to have a lot more of that over the next 10, 20 years, 30 years, right? In all the connected devices that you're talking about and the maturity of how AI is going to start to support our everyday needs. We're going to have that more Jetsons-like feel in our life where things are just sort of taken care of for us by the network that's around us. I think we're going to experience that, right? And we're going to have the security pains that come along with that as well. So it takes a lot of kind of, I guess, you got, just like growing, you got to do it in spurts, see how it works, feel the pain, settle it out, do it again, right? And we're just experiencing those in sort of macro iterations and micro iterations as the industry continues to evolve.
Yeah, that initial growth spurt in the 90s with the internet. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, but then you had the dot-com economic fallout, and that taught the economic sector, don't put too much faith in this, right? You still have to make something that goes in a box at the end of the day, right? You still have to be able to mail it and get it to them for them to use it, or it's not worth anything. So the financial sector had to realize that there's a possibility for problems, right? So we're in the same thing with the rise of IoT. Just because you can connect everything doesn't mean you should. So we're gonna run into those same little headaches with society of like, okay, now that we can do this with everything, where's that boundary? And it's gonna take us a while to figure that out. And then all these things happen in parallel too. Though it's not just one technical innovation at a time. You got the self-driving car, but you've also got the camera on the street corner, the camera in the classroom, right? Mm-hmm. Is that connected? Can a teacher and a parent both dial into the same camera and see what their kids are doing on the school grounds? The society comfortable with that? It can happen today, but we don't know how we feel about it yet. So those things are hard to deal with, and it's going to take time.
Yeah. From your perspective, I coming from like CISO, Supreme Court, how mm-hmm. do you feel in the future that? Do you think law is going to catch up with the rate of innovation of cybercrime? Meaning, mm-hmm. There was an instance where this man, we can just pretty much just call him a monster, was hosting a website. When that was going down, he ended up getting caught but they could only get them on harassment because it was hosted online. And
Mm,
it's the same thing, just done with the technology barrier in it. Do
yeah.
you think, I know there's a lot of politics that would go involved, where the rate of law can catch up with the rate of innovation of, to where the crime could fit the punishment could fit the crime, as technology evolves what crime looks like.
Well, let me start with this. I'm really glad that we're talking about it in terms of crime, because I think that's one of the problems that we have with around that risk fatigue that exists within our population in America, is because people don't think of it as crime, right? People don't equate, if you get your bank card stolen on a strange website, you don't feel the same violation as if somebody came in and broke the window of your house and stole something out of your bedroom, right? If somebody did that, you feel really violated. You'd say crime happened at my house, right? And I'm really worried about my security. When that happens to your bank account on a website, though, you don't feel violated, right? You don't feel that same response, but it's still a crime. It's fraud, but it's a crime, right? And so I'm glad that we're talking about it in terms of crime. I think that's something that, as a culture at large, we really need to start to emphasize. Not, I was a victim of identity theft, but you got to talk about it like, not that everyone should be sad or stressed out or emotional about it, but like, we need to talk about it with those terms and that vocabulary. The police were involved. This was an investigation. This was a crime, right? And with that being said, to your question, how are the laws going to keep up with the criminal nature of all of this? From an international perspective, I don't see a horizon where we've got a lot of good policy that can solve some of these problems. I don't really see anything in the near future where countries are going to get on the same page to stop some of the criminal activity, as far as ransomware, gangs, advanced persistent threats that are not state sponsored but that are just self-funded essentially. Those unfortunately, I think, are going to be around for a long time, because international policy just has no framework to grapple with this stuff. With that being said, though, at the federal, at the US, at the kind of Western democratic level, can we deal with these problems? Yeah, I think we can. I think the policymakers are paying very close attention now. I think if you just even casually watch the news, you hear cyber on just the news all the time now. CNN, Fox News, any nightly news channel, you'll hear stories about cyber crimes or about policy. Even the White House put out a new thing today. You'll hear that on the evening news about cyber policy from the White House. That means that the right people are paying attention. That means that the people in the federal level of government, and of course that trickles down to the state and local, are putting the money behind it. They're putting the right people in the right agencies. They're creating new agencies. They're putting the emphasis there. So as that continues to work at those levels, the legal side, the judicial side, and like the lawmaker side of everything can catch up. In America, we've got plenty of room to catch up, and we're in a good posture to do that.
That's fantastic. So being the Mic Club, we have our statement of minorities in cyber. We're trying to get minorities in cyber, but also just diversify. Cybersecurity is in my heart, not just age, race, gender, but diversity in thought, diversity in background. Because I have a firm belief that there's in this industry, it's a unique industry where there's space for everybody. There's IT
yes.
and there's OT. So there's infrastructure that on dams that I absolutely know nothing about, that needs to get secure. There's infrastructure with light systems. There's infrastructure in automobiles. There's basic SaaS companies out there. There's Apple, Google. There's space for everybody. And so you, with your diverse background, coming from the U.S. Army, being in the intelligence agency, I think you were a project manager in the Army as well. What advice do you have for individuals, whether it be minorities, women, or someone just like, hey, I watched this podcast with Dick on it, and man, that's awesome, and they just think, I wish I could do that. What advice and inspiration do you have for them?
Well, I'll give you a little personal background. I grew up in East Texas on a horse ranch. I had a fishing rod in my hand most of the time when I was a little kid. I had an accent that most people probably couldn't understand. And, I can't say it would have been unheard of for me to chew tobacco and ride a horse, So I'm not, you see me now and, I grew up in the country, man. Like we didn't have cable TV, we didn't have technology, right? Like I got all my stuff 5 years after everybody got a video game, I got it, right? I wasn't out there sparking wires together and working in a lab when I was, in high school or any of that stuff. So don't worry about your background, right? Worry about your passion and what you're focused on today, right? The background really has no relevance to how you're going to work in the industry, right? In the IT or security industry. So just reflect on that I couldn't spell computer until I joined the Army, and I figured it out. But to let people know, I think you brought up a great point, is that we all think that the entry into the security realm specifically, or the IT realm, is that you have to go like full computer nerd. You have to go learn every networking protocol that's out there. You have to get super deep into the IP layer and, learn all the ones and zeros and every single thing about computer systems. That's absolutely not true anymore, right? The security industry is starting to become its own independent industry that sort of takes the risk management concepts from what's been around for a long time from the insurance industry and from like business risk management, and applying those principles to technical needs of security. So what that means is every industry out there needs security professionals. They need cybersecurity professionals. They need audit type folks. They need governance and risk management type folks. So there's a lot of ways to get into security that are not purely hands-on keyboard hacking technical skills. And there are ways to manage an entire career around security audit and doing, governance and risk compliance, right? That's a long, lucrative career, and you do not need to be a tech stack nerd to be really good at that job, right? And you can do that within almost any industry. You can, so that's really the thing, is don't let a vertical, don't look at something and say, I'm really into fashion and design. Okay, there's no cybersecurity over there. That's not true. Those are retail shops. Those are websites. Those are huge logistic backbones that have to get products from A to B. I promise you, Gucci has a cybersecurity expert, all right? And you could be Gucci cybersecurity expert, right? And if you love Gucci and you want to go work in their IT department, they have one. So I'm saying, don't let your personal interest, that can be your inspiration to get into your IT or security career as well. You can make both of those things line up, and there's those opportunities are out there.
Thank you so much. I agree with all that. That's so good. That was so damn good. So you have there's so much space, and so I want to encourage absolutely everyone watching, if you aspire to do so, I encourage you to find what you like. It doesn't have to be what you're good at. My advice is find what you like. If you like this particular part of cyber, by all means, dive deep into that. If you like it and you're good at it, that's that match made in heaven. Because not anyone, myself included, and I very rarely know a few people that's just absolutely incredible across all operating systems, and they know those people are very unique. There's Mac admins, there's Windows admins, there's Linux admins, specific siloed in some of those roles. So find what you're good at, find what you're passionate about. And you heard us talk, by all means, help. Help. Well, we need this. But Dick, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it. And everyone, if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, by all means, comment down below. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep this community growing and make security on the forefront of everyone's minds as we continue to progress forward. And again, thank you all so much. This is Eric from the Mic Club. Much love. Peace.